Hello, Yoga Kula, and thank you for coming to my home one last time for our last class, our 75th class. It's the last class of our inner work series, so the 16th of that, and the last class of Christian yoga for women as I move on to my next project. And we're talking about visions and pondering all these things in our hearts. And it's just fallen together in a really beautiful way to be this lovely class for reflection, heart-centered reflection. And I've never taught a completely restorative class before with Christian yoga for women, partly because it's so prop heavy, but because you all are at home, you will be able to find some things that you can use to help you do this class. So this is a yoga bolster, and it is specifically designed to be a yoga prop. It's really firm and thick. It's about the size of a pillow, but one pillow as a replacement will not be a replacement for a bolster because this is very sturdy. So what I have done in the past and what you might like to do is I take two pillows and put them in one pillowcase. So these are those kind of extra long, cushy pillows that people put on their bed for decorative purposes, but if you lay on them, they're too thick for your neck. And when you look at it, this is super thick, but because it's softer than a regular bolster, you might even need to do two to have the same benefit of a bolster. But you can make your own homemade bolster and then get a blanket. This is a quilt that my mother made, and just something so that when you fold it up, it's, you know, a couple inches thick and it's large enough, ooh, my mudra thing, that you can make a roll like this, because we're gonna need that. If you happen to have two blocks, we only need them one time maybe, depending on the bolster you're using. So you can have those, and we do need some sort of strap. Now, I know sometimes they say you can use a tie. Ties are slippery, so if you tie a knot in a tie, they might slip out. What I prefer is the tie from a bathrobe. And if you have two ties from a bathrobe, that might do the trick for when we get to that portion of things. So, because this is a reflection class, we're going to be spending long periods of time in just one pose. And restorative yoga is like that. And restorative yoga is designed to give you energy. So, as we, finish out this year, this season, this book, and we're in a dark season, we might feel a little depleted and like we've had a long run of things. So I want this class to give you some energy. So we're going to start in Supta Baddha Konasana, and I'm going to show two examples of how to get into that. So with your homemade bolster, that's a monster, isn't it? You can bring the bolster up to the low back and sacrum, and the sit bones are still on the ground, and we lay back. And the bolster just allows the heart to open. Just pondering all things in our heart. There we go. And this could be your Supta Baddha Konasana at home. It's very comfortable. If it's not comfortable for some reason, say maybe the knees are too wide, you can prop them up. So that's often done with blocks, putting those under the thighs. So this could be one variation of Supta Baddha Konasana. And even though I didn't officially need those blocks, using them is really allowing my body to let go because there's no level of strain. So that's one variation. And if you have a bolster, then you can set that up on blocks. So this is the mama bear height. This is the baby bear height. And then we lean the bolster onto it and do the same thing where the low back is coming onto the bolster and we lie back, and this feels really good. But we can also take that blanket and roll it and place it over the feet and under the ankles, and that gives us a little support. Yes. For staying in this posture for some time. So choose how you would like to set up your Supta Baddha Konasana based on what you have. And we'll come into this pose and then close the eyes and let all the support hold you. Notice the breath. Notice the belly rising and falling. And we'll arrive here in a moment of reflection. As I was pondering this last section of inner work, when Robert Johnson was talking about visions, I thought I would list all the times that I've had a vision in my life. I've had a lot of moments where I've heard the Lord speak to me, that still small voice in our heart, all those nudges from the Holy Spirit, like the lyrics in the song just go in and speak to our soul, and really make God present to us. But a vision really has a visual aspect. So as I was thinking about these visions that I've had, I was thinking, I need to have a structured way that I'm pondering all these things in my heart on a regular basis. So those visions often come to us when we're really at a crossroads, when we're needing a sense of direction, sense of empowerment, hope, and they give us a sense of where we're going, and they become a touchstone, something that we can go back to when life gets hard. And so I was thinking about the rosary, and I've been praying the rosary for decades now. That's funny, because each one of the mysteries of the rosary, you pray a decade. But thinking about kind of that structure of a rosary where you have this moment in Mary's life or Jesus's life that you're spending some time pondering. So when I do pray my rosary, I have one of the visions that I had included in it. So there are 3 prayers for an increase of faith, hope, and love. And when I get to that prayer asking for an increase of love, I pray an extra one. I'm gonna cry. And I recall that vision that I had. I was at such a low point in my marriage, and I was going to marriage counseling by myself, not with my husband. And when I came out of the church where I was receiving counseling, I saw God, and it was like a solar eclipse. Like he was the sun, but the full blast of that would be too much. So it was like it was mostly covered, but I could see the light around the edges, just like in a solar eclipse, except it was energy. So I could see everything that was there. I could see the nationwide insurance across the street. I could see the trees. I could see the parking lot. I could see the sky. But there was also like this energy eclipse in the sky that I was looking at, and I was completely transfixed. It was the presence of God with that visual, and in that sense of his presence, I didn't care about anything. I had a taste of what total detachment would be like. And in that moment, if God had said to me, for the rest of your life, you will be a homeless bag lady, I would have said, certainly, and been completely willing to do whatever he asked me to do. So when I touch that vision again and ponder it in my heart, I feel God's love and acceptance and how transformed I am in his presence. And then I pray that same prayer again to love him back, right? Like the vision was his love towards me, and I want to reciprocate with my love to him. And then I pray that prayer again, and I ask to bring that kind of love to other people. And so that's just one of the visions that I've had that I ponder in my heart. And I'm wondering if, as you lay there in this restorative, if you can bring a moment to mind when you had a vision, when God showed you something in a way that just, it stays with you like nothing material could. And every time you return to it, it feeds you the same way it did in that moment. It's one of those moments where you say, from that point on, my life changed, or my life is still being impacted and guided by that moment. It arrived. When you've been in a restorative a while, you'll feel that deep sigh of letting go come that tells you that posture has done its work. And I just had that. I hope you are experiencing that as well. And we're going to move on from here, but slowly. So bring the hands under the thighs to kind of lift and close the thighs like a book. Remove the blanket. Extend the legs. Interlace the fingers in front of the heart. Flip the palms away and reach the arms up and overhead. Stretching through the shoulders. And then bring the hands back to the heart. Change the weave of the fingers. So now my right index is on top of the left. press the palms away and reach up. And release. And you can windshield wiper the feet back and forth. Just wake up the legs. And then we're going to slowly roll off of the bolster. You can remove it off to the side. Move the blocks off to the side if you had those. And just rest in the fetal position for a moment. Another great restorative. That moment of pausing between two things. I'm pausing now between Christian yoga for women and rebuilding with Jesus, which will start in January. And just absorbing all that's happened in these 75 classes. On the thumbnail, you would have seen the 9 books that we've read through completely. And we've also had chapters from other books like The Great Work of Your Life, The Energy Codes, Energy Medicine, stuff from Nonviolent Communication, and practices like tapping and the work of Byron Katie, Wim Hof breathing. Ooh, just so many things. Just how do we take that all in and help it nourish us for moving into the next season? Use the hands to press on the floor and come up so that the head comes last. Alrighty. One of my rosaries. So if you're not familiar with the rosary, the prayer that I was just telling you about, that I pray about loving God and remembering that vision, is here. But I thought if you have multiple visions in your life, like each one of these Our Father beads would be remembering that vision. And then all these prayers in between are a time to ponder that in your heart. So whatever speaks to you about how to remember and recall those touchstone moments and visions in your life, like maybe it's a set of rocks that you keep on your dresser, and each one represents a different time and season when the Lord met you and taught you a new thing, you know, like Much Afraid in our first book, how she had that little pouch of all the rocks of remembrance that then became jewels in her crown. But we're going to do some mudras, 5 of them, which fits very nicely because there are 5 mysteries in a rosary. There's 5 joyful mysteries, 5 sorrowful mysteries, 5 glorious mysteries. And since we're in Advent, I thought we'd be thinking about the joyful mysteries. So this is Lotus Mudra. The pinky fingers and the thumbs touch, and we hold that in front of our heart, kind of like a flower. So if you've never had a vision, then you can ponder Mary's. And so we gather all those moments where the Lord has met us, touched us, given us a vision for where we're going, or how the angel Gabriel came to Mary, just like a vision, and told her what would be happening and how she responded, and what an example she is to us of how to respond when Jesus or the Father or the Spirit takes us in a new direction. Be it done unto me according to your word. And how we can bring the remembrance of that into our heart to strengthen us and help us move forward with hope, with love, with clarity and focus. All right, our next restorative is a twist, and this can be gentle or deep depending on what you are capable of today. So bring the bolster long ways, and I have my right hip up against the bolster and my left ankle in my right ankle, and we turn our torso toward the bolster and walk out over it, and then place our cheek on the bolster. Now this can be a full twist where we bring the face in the opposite direction. So the head's turning in one way and the knees are going in the other. If that feels too deep, because your bolster is too low, you can bring your blanket on top. So it's like a second mini bolster, and give that a try. But if that feels more like it's a strain than like it's relaxing, then feel free to just go with the easier option. We'll just stay here in this position, pondering all these things in our heart. And I hope the placement of the bolster, because we're laying across it, really helps you feel your heartbeat. All the ways the Lord has strengthened us, strengthened you, strengthened me. I had another, it was like a season of a vision when I really wanted to know how should we worship. And I was studying the tent of meeting because that was God's original design. And the Lord told me to also study the Gospel of Luke, and I started to. And when I got up to Jesus and his ministry, I was really struck by spirit and truth and how he embodied that and what that meant. And it was like all of life was sparkling for 2 weeks about spirit and truth and spirit and truth. And everywhere I looked was spirit and truth. And I saw people divided into spirit people and truth people. And I felt such a desire to bring the spirit people and the truth people together. And that the way to do that was to go get yoga training. So that was another vision that I had that was at a juncture in my life that it wasn't quite a surprise. There was something I was seeking. I was seeking to know how to worship. And I was doing the part that I could do. I could go into my Bible and I could read there and I could ponder there. But then God met me with the part that I couldn't do. I couldn't know how to go to the Gospel of Luke. And I couldn't have seen the world that way. Those were his gifts to me.
But I guess in that eclipse of seeing God when I was getting marriage counseling, I was seeking, and I'd gotten up to the edge of what I could do. I could go to marriage counseling even by myself. But then God met me and brought me further. And slowly rise up. And we're going to come around in the other direction. Stay low and go slow. This is restorative. Bring the bolster up to the left hip. And again, walking out over the bolster. Maybe turning the head away. Maybe going in the same direction. Maybe adding that mini bolster on top so that you can go in the other direction. Just whatever feels like it gives you more energy than it's taking. Again, tune into the heartbeat as the heart comes in contact with the bolster. So since we're studying Robert Johnson and dream analysis and visions, I knew I was supposed to be a yoga teacher, and I became one. And I knew I was supposed to bring this to the church. And a little while back, I had a dream where there is a barrel full of yoga lesson plans that I've written. And it's true, I have a lot of lesson plans that I've written. And I was putting these nuggets of incense, if you've ever seen resin incense, but they were made out of blood. And I was getting them out of my nose and putting them on top of this. So these chunks of beautiful resin, almost look like rubies, incense on top of all these. And so the interpretation was pretty easy for me because Mr. Rogers, I've heard a little of his story, and he wanted to create music and be on television, and he had written a few songs, and he took them to someone who was in music, and he said, "What do you think of my songs?" And the man said, "They're good. Come back when you have a barrel full." So I just felt so seen by the Lord that he knows that I've made a barrel full of lesson plans. And, you know, a lot of times dreams speak in puns, and, you know, people will say paying through the nose and paying with your blood and things like that. So there's been a sacrificial element to me following this path, and it's been a vulnerable one for me to share what I care about and what I love with other people who may judge me or tell me I'm wrong or not supposed to be doing this or not show up. But in the tent of meeting, on top of the bread of the presence, they would put incense. And they put that bread out every week. And I teach every week. So I just felt like the Lord was saying, this is your offering to me. And he was seeing the sacrifice that I was making, the blood, sweat, and tears of it. And that was beautiful. And that it's a worthy offering. It's not ordinary bread.
rising up off of the bolster. Whew. Place that off to the side. We'll come around for another mudra. So this is a mudra for, all of these mudras are for the heart, but this one is about breaking through obstacles. And so I thought, as we're thinking about the rosary and our visions and Mary and pondering all these things in our heart, that this was good for the visitation. So the obstacle was Joseph wanted to put her away quietly, right? We're not on the same page, and what would people have thought of her? But God had given her a place that she could go and be spoken to by someone who understood what it's like to be called by God into a new season and could just rejoice with her. And so I have my right hand with my thumb down in front of the heart, left hand in front. And on an inhale, we pull, exhale, release. And we do that 6 times. Breaking through obstacles. How many scientists have had a vision to answer the problem that they've had? How many times have we gotten to that place that just feels like a rock wall? That there's nowhere to go. And God gives us a vision. Like when there was no good water to drink, and Moses prays, and God has him see a stick, and he throws it in, and the waters become sweet. He couldn't have seen that unless God showed it to him. All right, so now we're flipping it around. So the left is next to the heart, and the right is in front. Same thing. Inhale, pull. Exhale, release. So Mary has the vision with the angel. Joseph has the dream. And no more obstacles. I haven't been counting, but we'll make this our last one. Inhale. Thank God we have a place to go. So if you have one of these kind of bolsters and you have a block also, maybe you'd like a block for this. But if you have just the yoga bolster, then you can use that. And we are going to, you know what? I'm going to have to pull this under me as I lay down. So we're going to lay down like we're going into supported bridge, and then lifting the hips and sliding the bolster under. So the bolster is under both the sacrum and the low back. And this can feel really good. We're going to stretch the right leg out and then pull the left knee in. And just rest into this posture and feel how it's opening up that right hip flexor, lengthening the right quad, but without much strain. visitation vision that I've had. So when I was pregnant with Mina, I was feeling very disconnected from this baby growing inside me. And I felt like I wanted to meet the baby so that it wouldn't just be the baby, but someone I knew and could be intentionally taken care of. And so I was sitting in a papasan chair in front of the fire, just like I'm doing now, in front of the fire. And this dark presence came off to the right, and I knew it was Gabriel. And I turned and I asked, "How do you want me to take care of you?" And the feeling of this presence, this being, this person, this spirit, was very sober, very like sober and noble. You know how you straighten up in the presence of someone, not necessarily because they're stern, but almost to that degree. And Gabriel said, "Carry me a lot." And I had Mina, who really did not like to be touched. But then I had Rowan, whose middle name is Gabriel, and I had to carry him a lot. And I'm still carrying him a lot. Homeschooling and all the extra that he needs. But remembering that vision, if I would do that more often, it would remind me of who Rowan is at the core. And he's so goofy as a kid and trying to fit in with teenage boys and things. But I saw how noble his spirit was and how serious in that moment. And I would maintain that respect for him more if I would recall that vision on a more regular basis and ponder those things in my heart. And release this left leg long. Ooh. Feel the difference between the two legs for a moment. And then reach the right knee in. There's the sigh. We got to the sigh. And I just felt my left kneecap unsquinch. As the longer you stay in a restorative, the more you'll feel parts of you let go that you didn't even know were holding tension. I had another vision where I don't know if I was actually studying the Bible or just pondering. I know exactly where I was, sitting on the couch, and I felt like I met Paul from the epistles. And I could just sense his presence. And again, it was like a dark being, you know, like just the shadow of who he was. And what I could feel about him that was so impressive was how vertical his orientation was. He cared absolutely nothing for this world. His only concern was God. And as a woman who sometimes wrestles with, you know, the 5 problematic verses that Paul wrote that we all wish he didn't as women, but then the other one that, you know, just we're allowed to eat anything kind of thing, and how that can be a problem as well, even though he was echoing Jesus, because the church eating cupcakes with blue frosting
is not what he meant. He meant to stop being hung up about it, but he didn't mean to stop caring for this temple and just eat all the junk food you want, right? That's license, and he talked about that in other places, about not using our freedom as an opportunity to sin. But I really felt him and respected him, and that 100% vertical that I could feel in him made me want to aspire to that, to get to the place where I don't care about the horizontal, that place that I felt in that vision of the solar eclipse, that I felt that complete detachment from everything in this world. And how could that become something I embody on a regular basis? And release that right leg. You can pause here for a moment. If this feels like a bit of a strain and effort, we're going to go to supported bridge anyway. You can just bring the soles of the feet to the floor. And just pause here. I had another vision, and this one was about Joseph, Mary's Joseph. And I felt his presence as well. And what's interesting, because he was a carpenter, is that he felt like the trunk of an oak tree, absolutely solid and so steady, like an unwavering. You know, and I could feel how Mary could rely on him and how silent he was. If you look at he and Mary speaks, Joseph is mostly silent. So just that feeling of quiet strength. Which is another thing that we can aspire to embody. That a vision may start that work in us, but it may be years before we embody that thing that we saw, that we felt, that we knew we were called to. But we've tasted it, and it's changed us just in that what Jesus said about a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. The vision is like that. And use the feet to press into the ground to lift the hips up. Remove the bolster. Come back down onto the sacrum. And roll off to the side and come up into a cross-legged pose. There it is. My hairdo dad. All right. Our next mystery in the Joyful Mysteries is the birth of Jesus. And the mudra I've chosen for that is Fearless Heart Mudra. It's a little difficult to explain, but we'll try. So bring the palms together, just like in our regular prayer pose. Then bring the right hand behind, so we're crossing at the wrists. And then we're going to bring the right fingertips, the index fingers wrapping around each other, the middle fingers wrapping around each other, the pinky fingers wrapping around each other, and then the ring finger and the thumb come together at the heart.
So ponder how the visions in your life have made you fearless. How they've given you courage when you needed it. How they helped you know that even if you would face opposition or hard trials, that this is exactly where you were supposed to be. So even though Mary and Joseph are in a stable, feeling that kind of rejection and hardship and you're not important and the long journey and Rome can make their lives miserable anytime they feel like it with a little decree, that they knew that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. And what I think about, I'm going to cry here too, as I've pondered, this story from Mary's vantage point, is that Rachel died in childbirth and was buried near Bethlehem. And I just think how Mary would have been willing for that to be her story too. Because all the angels said was that you would give him the name Jesus. And Rachel named her son and then died. And Mary went anyway. That is a fearless heart. And release that mudra. Whew. We're going to grab our strap. So if you have a strap, we're going to make a very big loop. So the end goes through the 2 loops, over the first loop, under the second, to pull through and lock. I could stay on that ponder in my heart all day. And we're going to put this strap around us and then come onto the back. If you'd like to use your blanket as a little pillow from this point on, you can. My mudras keep flying. So we want this strap to land on the low ribs. We don't want it on the low back. And we're going to bring the right knee in and the strap over the ball of the foot. And then extend out through the left leg. Adjust the strap any amount so the strap is holding the legs in this position. You can feel free to bend this top knee a little bit if the low back is feeling strained. And just sink into this pose. So I had a vision come to me when I was afraid. I'm asking the Lord if I should give all the details. He's nodding my head. It's another reason I became a yoga teacher. He moves me around. So my dad had a book on the teachings of Buddha that were up in my room, and I saw them there and I thought, oh, I shouldn't read that. And the Lord was like, go ahead. I'm like, okay.
So I read these teachings, and they're really just basic wisdom. They feel like a mix of Proverbs plus Ecclesiastes, and just mixed together. That kind of lived experience wisdom that comes when we've slowed down enough to really be clear in our observation. But there was a prayer in that book. It's called the Prayer of the Bodhisattva. And it's a prayer where you ask all suffering to come to you and all your joy to go to other people. And at the time, I was a single mother and recently divorced and stressed out all the time. And I said, Lord, I cannot pray that prayer. I can't ask for more suffering to come to me so that other people have less. And I can't give away the joy that I do have to other people. And so that's where I had left it with the Lord. Just, it's too big. It's too hard. And one day I was coming up the steps to my bedroom, and I had a vision of Jesus. And he was smiling at me, and his arms were extended wide in that invitation way, not like to come into a hug, but give it to me. And he was like, give me your suffering. I'll give you my joy. And he was praying that prayer for me. And I realized in that moment, I'm trying to be the giver of grace before I've really arrived at that level and that capacity. And where I am right now is I'm the receiver of grace. And I could see on Jesus's face how delighted he was to do that. He was delighted to take my suffering. He was delighted to give me joy. And so I saw what fearless love would look like, what true willingness would look like. What I was embodying was not that. And you can bend that knee, release the strap off the foot, and reach out that leg. So for a moment, that Shavasana, to compare the difference between the two sides of the body. And then if you like to start with the sole of the right foot on the floor and the knee bent, sometimes it's just easier to get in a pose that way. And then extend up through the left leg this time. You might notice the two sides of the body are different. Maybe you need to open the strap up so you have a little less of an angle that the leg has to strive for. Or maybe you want to tighten it up a little bit. But here's the other part of that vision of seeing Jesus. He was blue. And when I remembered it, I said he was the color of a bruise. Like he's been so beat up and yet so joyful and willing. But this was years before I became a yoga teacher, and when I learned that in Hinduism, Krishna is blue. And in the Bhagavad Gita, he teaches about yoga, and 3 levels of yoga. But one of the things that I learned from my mother which should be obvious, but maybe, we've just never thought of it this way. When Jesus was on the cross, he was oxygen deprived. He couldn't breathe. He would have been blue. But because the main detail at that point in the crucifixion is that the darkness was over all the world, we don't see Jesus that way. We don't see him as blue. We see him as in the dark and crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so if I had been born a Hindu and then heard about Jesus, I would see that Jesus is blue, like Krishna. And he doesn't just teach us about yoga, he sacrifices his life to bring us into union with God. And I would see in the religion I grew up in the fulfillment of Jesus, of that religion. Like it was the Old Testament and Jesus was the New Testament of that. So it took many years before all the details of that vision made sense to me and came together. And maybe there's more coming. But while I was telling you about that, I saw Jesus another time when he was in my bed, and right where I would lay down and go to sleep, he was laying in my bed. And he looked so beat up, like punched in the face till he was swollen, but in a way that made his face look like a lion. And I realized he is like Sleeping Beauty, and I'm like the prince having to fight my way through all the thorns, like in Sleeping Beauty, to go and get to my Sleeping Beauty. So many visions to ponder. And bend the knee, release the strap, stretch out the legs. Whew. This is a grueling emotional reflection for me. My. We're gonna roll to the side and come up. We have another mudra. This one is for presenting Jesus in the temple. And this mudra is one for heart attacks. So we bring the two middle fingers to the thumb, the index finger to the base of the thumb, and the pinky fingers stretching long. And just thinking about the joy Mary had bringing baby Jesus to present to the Lord. Bringing those two doves or pigeons because they were poor, and that she was so elated. She lived through childbirth. She has this beautiful Messiah in her hands to present to God and thank him that it's the beginning of a new day, a new era. And that's when Simeon gives her the news that a sword will pierce her heart. This is like the beginning of the bad news, that he'll be spoken against.
And the way Simeon worded it, she knew that a sword would pierce Jesus's heart, because it would also pierce her heart. And so the angel at first gave her a vision of the giant overview and how beautiful it was that the Son of God would be born of her. But in this moment, it was like, and the rugged path and the suffering that would all entail. So just think about the ways God has strengthened you to handle the bad news, to be able to bear it. Has He ever given you a vision that warned you about something? It told you it was going to be hard, but in the end it was going to be all right. And you can keep your pillow there. We're going to do a spinal twist, and you can bring your bolster off to the side, kind of alongside the body. We're going to draw the right knee in. So my bolster's on my left, and I'll have my right knee eventually go over to the bolster. You can rotate the ankle, point and flex. And then I like to put that foot back down, hop the left hip under, and then have that knee land on the bolster. And the right arm reaches off to the right, and the left hand can rest on that right knee. This is a twist, but we're also doing it as a restorative. So allow yourself to be held and sink in. I think about the other thing that was happening in that moment was Simeon and Anna were showing Mary and Joseph how to get through what would be asked of them. So we know that Joseph died before Jesus's ministry, or sometime during his ministry, because he's not there at the foot of the cross. And Jesus asked John to take her into his house because there wouldn't be Jesus to take care of her, and there's not Joseph to take care of her. So we know that Joseph dies. And Joseph is seeing Simeon saying, just seeing Jesus is enough. He can depart in peace. That Simeon's vision that the Messiah has come is enough. And so Joseph can let go and say, it was enough. I got to see him as a child. I got to help him grow up. I may not have been there for the whole story, but it was enough. And Mary got to see Anna, who was a widow and had stayed in the temple all those years after her husband died, in prayer and fasting and becoming a prophet. So even though we don't tend to think of that moment as a vision, there's elements of it like that. That the word that Simeon spoke was about the future, and they were seeing something of their future in it, and being given the strength and the example of Simeon and Anna's joy as something that they could embody when they were called upon to be just like them. On the center of the head, unwind, straighten out the pelvis and bring the bolster to the other side, getting dog hair. And draw the left knee in, rotate the ankle, point and flex the foot, sole of the foot on the floor, hip hops the right hip under, and then left knee comes across the body in a relaxed way. Gaze and left arm reaching off to the left. So after I had that vision of the solar eclipse, I went back to that same marriage counselor the next week. And this time, when I came home, I could see my children with God's eyes. And I could feel him rejoicing and delighting in them, saying, "Look at my little creations. They're so precious." And that delight that Anna and Simeon had in seeing little baby Jesus, I could feel God seeing my children that way. And it wasn't the same as thinking that thought. It was like I was God the Father looking at my children as God the Father. That moment of overlap that a vision can feel like. And recalling all the visions that we've had in this life, and how would that change who we are if we kept pondering those things in our heart? We spend so much time in our mind, and we spend so much time in the past, and the flesh is always having us evaluate our future based on the past. That person looks and acts like a person you knew from your past, and so you're preparing for what happened with that old relationship to be happening in the new. But what if we went to these past visions for a sense of what our future was going to be? That we were looking not at the low points of our life with our mind to stay in that survival mode. How can we survive the best way? By learning from our past pains and hurts, but referencing the high points we've had with the Lord. All those visions that have told us who we are, who he is, what our life is about. And looking through that lens at the future, that heart way of looking. It's empowering. Center the head, lift the top knee, and the bottom. And for our savasana, we are going to be listening to a YouTube that is a book written by Tomie dePaola called The Clown of God, and that book has really touched me. It has Mary and baby Jesus in it, and it's a Christmas story and a legend, so it has that blurring of is this story real? Is it made up? Has it been embellished? That we often get into when we're in the unconscious and we start to dig deep into the stories of dreams and visions, and where does reality leave off and the unconscious fill in the gaps in a more fanciful way. But that is about 15 minutes. So I thought we could do our Shavasana in 2 parts. One as a legs up the wall moment, and I'm just going to show you how to do legs up the wall, and then you can turn off this video and go turn on your YouTube, and then when you're ready, just turn this legs up the wall into I hope you can see me on the camera, a hip up against the wall, or sliding glass door. Back before the fire, our walls were so covered with stuff, the only place I could do legs up the wall was a door, and sliding glass door was off on it. So my right hip is up against the door, and we turn so that our hips end up a little closer to the wall than they would have otherwise. So this is our legs up the wall, and maybe you want to stay here a couple minutes, 5 minutes, but at some point you'll feel like, okay, I'm done. And so halfway through your Shavasana, bring the feet down the wall and walk the body out and back, and then just continue your Shavasana as usual on your mat. So want that blanket under your neck and head, that can be nice. So go turn on your YouTube, and I will meet you back here. All right, deep in the breath. Wiggle the fingers and the toes, and begin to rock the head from side to side, making small movements. Inhale the arms up overhead till the thumbs touch on the floor above you. Draw the legs together. I gotta do one more scooch. Pointing the toes and come into a long stretch. You can hook the thumbs together and reach the right fingertips and right toes away from each other as you squinch in the left side body. Then reach left fingertips and left toes away from each other, squinching in the right. Do a couple more of these fishy wiggles. Then draw the knees into the chest and roll to your right side using that bottom arm as a pillow. Use the hands to press into the floor and come up into a comfortable seated position with the eyes closed. Inhale the arms up overhead, and palms come together at the heart. We're at our last mudra, Anjali Mudra, that prayer pose with palms touching is a mudra that encourages a deep feeling of gratitude in the body. And the last joyful mystery is Mary finding Jesus in the temple. And she was shocked and dismayed and troubled and asking, why would you do this to us? And Jesus said, didn't you know I needed to be about my Father's business? And Mary takes him home, and that is when she is pondering all of these things in her heart. And we can ponder in our heart that we have found Jesus in the temple of our heart, that he's there, that he's been helping us. He's been showing us how to navigate our lives through his word, through those hints and songs, through dreams, through visions. But he's been there through all of it. And it's a joy that he is there in our temple and that we can count on him. So Jesus, thank you. Thank you for this season of Christian yoga for women. Thank you for all that we were able to learn and the people we got to meet and the practices we got to find out about that have helped us and the ways we've grown with you. And Lord, I just ask you to bless all the women who I've come in contact with through this ministry and to bless my next ministry and help us all as we part ways and go in our new directions with you to keep coming back to the visions that you've given us, to ponder them in our heart on a regular basis so that we can orient towards the future from a different thing in our past, those high points with you. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you.